Hi, friends. Welcome to today's episode of We Are Marketing Happy, a healthcare marketing podcast. My name is Jenny Bristow. I am the CEO and owner of Hedy Hopp, a full-service, fully healthcare marketing agency. And I am so excited today to have Julia Pitlyk join the call. So very excited to announce that Julia has officially joined Hedy Hopp as our director of marketing. So welcome aboard, Julia.
Hello. So happy to be here. Second time on the podcast now in a different capacity. So excited. Thanks for letting me jump in on this really exciting topic.
Oh, it's so exciting. We did a webinar earlier this week and we had really strong attendance. It was really kind of heartfelt for me to be able to see the number of healthcare marketers that want to get this analytics and patient privacy issue right.
Yep.
Nobody's doing bad things on purpose, right? They're just taking things from other industries and had put them into healthcare. We didn't, as an industry, really realize the overall repercussion. So the webinar was fabulous. Side note, if you want to receive a copy of it, shoot me an email. We have it recorded. Happy to share. Jenny@hedyandhopp.com. But today, let's talk about execution because a lot of the Q&A, we did an extended Q&A, really just stayed on the line for folks to ask any questions. A lot of it was around like, and then what?
Yeah. What now? Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said in the webinar, like we are problem aware at this point, right? We've been dealing with this OCR guidance for almost a year. So the need to change is known. And we've heard so many people at all the conferences we've been to this year say, okay, we stripped off our analytics. We're kind of in this, what are we going to implement?
Yeah.
Then the next bucket is, and then how are we going to get back to marketing and what's that going to look like for us and our patient acquisition effort in this sort of new paradigm of analytics and activation changes?
Yeah. So in this podcast episode, we're not going to talk about the different journeys and ways you can fix your tracking. We have plenty of content on that. And like I said, the webinar is a great crash course. If you want a recording of it, send it to me. What I want to talk about today is the path that we see most systems and providers and payers moving towards, which is server-side tag manager, right? So they're choosing not to do a CDP like FreshPaint. They're choosing not to move over to a new analytics platform like Pitlyk Pro, though at the end of the session, I want to chat with you a little bit about the what ifs if they do that. But for those folks that are moving over to server-side tag manager, I want to talk a little bit about kind of what that looks like. First of all, give me your thoughts. Like if you're moving over, because you were on the client side really recently, like what kind of conversations are people having at the leadership level or what should they be having at the leadership level?
Yeah, absolutely. My brain is always going to two big buckets. It's the analytics and the activation. And of course, they go hand in hand, especially over the past, decade and a half, as marketers have become more and more data driven. We're so used to looking at the data, making decisions, changing our tactics, rinse and repeat. So I'm thinking about, okay, if I'm sitting on the client side, I've implemented server-side Google Tag Manager to address the OCR bulletin and some of these guidelines that have come out. What are my analytics going to look like? And what's my activation plan going to look like? So I think first and foremost, I like to think about like, one is just wholesale off the table. And we talked about this in our webinar a bit, and it's hard to say, but things like list buying, of course, list uploads, building lookalikes, like those are all things that you're taking your data, you're giving it to an ad platform, you're feeding the beast, as we say, like no more. That very clear, put that in a bucket, that's off the table. Then it's, okay, what tactics and activation strategies are on the table in a different way? So for us, that's a lot of like the retargeting piece, right? You can do retargeting with data in the platform. So all of these like walled gardens we used to talk about, Facebook, Google, they've got their data. You can use things like a consumer who clicked on an ad as an action that you can retarget on. So that for me is like looking at that activation bucket first, because server-side GTM is going to handle a lot of the analytics issues that are coming up from this bulletin. But it's looking at that activation bucket and first and foremost saying like, okay, what have we been off the table? What are things we kind of need to tweak? And then some of those bigger questions that come out of it for me are, okay, we took some tactics off the table. We changed some things from our retargeting and our conversion attribution. What is our data going to look like? Because so many of these marketers are saying, well, leadership's not changing our growth expectations after this bulletin came out.
Yeah.
we still need high performing digital marketing, and the tactics we were doing were getting us there. For me, it's that next step is how to proactively talk to leadership about we are changing tactics because of these reasons. What should we all expect to come from it, and sort of giving some runway to really learn from the tactical change.
Absolutely. It's sort of like thinking back, whenever folks switched from Google Analytics to GA4, right? It went from session to event targeting. That's not apples to apples, right? And so this is that same kind of situation. It's a line in the sand, not apples to apples anymore. Our goal is still the same efficacy of spend, but it's not the same. One thing I heard in a webinar I did yesterday with a hospital-specific group, in the afternoon I did one, is one of the people actually said, I feel like we need to go back to strictly analog marketing tactics. And it hurt my heart. I was like, no, do not do that. Digital is still 100% possible. You just have to stop putting data into these platforms. Like you said, walled garden, use what's in Facebook. You can use Facebook's targeting. If they have specific targeting set up based off of age, occupation, interest, whatever, you can still use all of that, right? You just can't upload your list into Facebook to make it more specific.
Yeah, exactly. So I think like a very specific example that we see, a tactic, kind of a journey that we see a lot of our clients doing, is patient acquisition marketing goes to a landing page. The goal is to fill out the form, right? Like, and love that, because we want that email address, something to have more of that one-to-one communication with, making sure that you're doing it in systems that are compliant. So that journey makes perfect sense. So I look at that and say, okay, what in this new world order needs to change? And it's optimizing the ads to that conversion of filling out that form, because you're taking something that's happening in your world and you're sending it back to the ad platforms and saying, optimize for this. So if that's being taken off the table, what can we expect to see in our campaign performance data because of that? So those tactics were on the table because they worked, right? Like, we're performance marketers. They made the ads perform better. They brought down CPAs. So if I'm in that seat, and what we're telling our clients in that seat is that needs to be treated as, you need to look at it as sort of a new benchmarking period, telling your leadership, what do you think the next 2 to 4 weeks, maybe even a couple months, are making a tactical change. I would literally, like, in the measurement plan documents that we have and in your analytics tools, like, on this date, we changed these things for any optimization, and say, okay, now we have this line in the sand. And for the next 2, 4, 6, whatever weeks, we're looking to see what's happening to conversions, what's happening to our CPA. Like, we heard at some conferences, the numbers are going to go in a direction that you probably you don't want them to go in.
Doesn't feel good.
It doesn't feel good. This isn't a marketing optimization tactical change. It's a regulatory and compliance one. But I think really running through that thought experiment of what are we expecting to see, starting to see that with leadership, and really start to say, like, we need to have this X amount of weeks as a learning period to what performance we can get with this new type of compliant marketing, and then use that to inform some updated projections, some budget needs. And I know all of that sounds those aren't ideal conversations to have. I think, again, like we said, to any client, any year of doing this, it's bring the data to the table, have an informed conversation based off of that.
And I think it's really important to highlight that we're not stripping away all data, right? We're not going into a blind world where we don't understand anything anymore. If you choose the server-side Google Tag Manager implementation, which, again, most people that we're talking to are choosing that path from an annual cost savings, speed of implementation, et cetera, you still can use UTM parameters to be able to track and understand the success of campaigns, keywords, creatives. A lot of platforms like LinkedIn just 2 weeks ago came out with the LinkedIn conversion API that you can actually tie in to pull conversion data in to be able to understand how to optimize. The part we're missing, though, for people to understand is that automated feedback loop where it's automatically optimizing based off completed conversions. You're still going to get conversion information. You're just going to have to pay a little bit more attention to the way that your team chooses to optimize, or your agency, whatever, chooses to optimize those campaigns, right? But it's not the end of the world.
At the end of the world, I think this is also one of those periods of time where it's, let's roll up our sleeves and really get into the data. Yes, we're going to have tracking and optimization. But I would say, I would also challenge, like, this is an opportunity to paint it nicely. to roll up your sleeves and look at, even when you have, before you make some of these tactical changes, really look at the patient acquisition, let's say, as far down the funnel as you can. And I think we really push a lot of our clients to do this when we do that full ROI analysis, but let's take it beyond that form fill, which is a wonderful marketing conversion. But how many of those patients, or prospective patients, we should say, how many of them pulled through to schedule an appointment? How many of them pulled through to actually show up to an appointment, right? And that's definitely again, a roll up your sleeves data exercise. But I would be really curious to know, are you seeing certain trends in certain channels where maybe you're getting a lot of volume of form fills, but not quite the pull through lower funnel? And maybe this is a way to inform some adjustments to your marketing mix spend too.
Oh, I love that. That's such a positive way to go into it, as an opportunity versus simply feeling like you're having things stripped away from you. So I love that. Pivot with positivity, as we say at Hedy and Hopp.
Agreed. This puts us in a little bit of like a last touch attribution world. I'm curious what you think about that. Google marketing attribution models, and you'll find so many complex custom implementations. I feel like this pushes us to a last touch, but maybe helps us get a little bit away from chasing that holy grail of a perfect attribution model at the same time. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think it'll be interesting once we see more full implementations and more time with those implementations. I'd love to have somebody from our activation analytics team on a future podcast and talk about the data. Like, what have our clients seen? Because right now I feel like it's going to be mostly speculation. I think there are still ways that you could do a multi-touch attribution model, but I don't know with real world execution what that's going to look like. So I think that's kind of like a TBD.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, so that's the solution if somebody is going the path of server-side tag manager, or not solution, that is the expectation of experience. You know what I'm saying? If they choose a CDP or a new analytics tool, which are the other two journeys that we talk about in our webinar and our overall education process around this, it doesn't necessarily change it. You know what I'm saying? Like on the tactic execution, you can't do remarketing just because you chose to go with Pitlyk Pro, or you can't upload lists to Facebook simply because you chose to go with Fresh Paint. It doesn't change tactical execution, but it may change the way that you view data and the way that data is presented to your leadership team, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, like, looking at some of those other journeys, I just keep pulling my brain back to analytics and activation, because exactly that. If you implement a pro, like, the tactical stuff still needs to be put back on the shelf. Some of the things we mentioned earlier. So there's just definitely two big buckets to navigate here. Really tough. I think CDPs for an organization that's ready for it. And by ready, there's a data maturity, there's resources on tech and marketing, there's budget. I think those are better positioned to be a solution that helps tackle both the analytics and the activation, because it sits kind of right on top of your world, and it takes your data and sends it to the analytics and the activation platforms. So that's something that I think could be a really good path forward. But again, got to be ready for it. Be ready for it. So that's why we focus so much on the server-side GTM, because it's something that has a lower barrier to entry to get the analytics, get the data back. But you're exactly right. There's no one perfect, easy switch to flip on or off that's going to address the complications in all of these buckets.
So it's really interesting to me that nobody yet is talking about marketing tactic changes based off of this. I feel like we're the only ones raising this so far. So when we think about like problem aware versus solution aware, when you think about marketing analytics, most organizations are solution aware. But the number of questions in our webinar yesterday or on Wednesday about tactical changes as a result of all of this was kind of astonishing to me. I feel like most people aren't even problem aware yet on that side of the house. So it's going to be interesting, I feel like, over the next 6 months as people start figuring out, oh, wow, my agency is trying to do media buys as normal and they aren't bringing anything new to the table, but they're not the ones that are going to get the big OCR fines. We are, right?
Right. And that, I think that a lot of that comes from in the problem aware period, right? What we've been saying, audit everything, go to Pitlyk.com, scrape every tag you may know or not know is on your site, look at your entire MarTech stack. And I think where some of that is coming from is that if you read the bulletin, it's you can very clearly, when you read it, kind of ascertain, okay, we're talking analytics, we're talking meta, but then you start to see all of these other tools that work based off of some semblance of like seeing an IP address or a device. And it really, you start to turn over all those rocks and think about all the ways that you communicate, distribute content on your site. And it really opens up this, it's kind of this hornet's nest of activation. So I think that's where, again, even though you may know at a high level, okay, we can't feed the beast with our data, IP is PHI, like still doing that audit because it really helps you kind of block and tackle and look at what solutions in your tech stack you may need to change in addition to tactics.
Exactly. Well, I feel like this has been a really helpful overview, and hopefully it's going to spark some really good conversations within organizations about how they want to approach it, better setting expectations, kind of creating a level of calm around it, right? Yeah. Like, we can't change this, so we might as well lean in a way that is healthy for our organization and not create unnecessary chaos within our conversations and expectations. So I like that. Any parting words?
Well, I love that because I find calm in spreadsheets. Taking the data and saying, okay, what might be worst case scenario, middle case scenario, best case scenario, like just, again, finding a little bit of clarity through taking your mind to what could happen to your marketing next, I think is going to just help keep ripping the Band-Aid off and keep setting those expectations.
And knowing it's not just their organization, right? Everybody in healthcare is experiencing this. And I had one person push back whenever I was chatting with them, and they said, like, well, what's enforcement look like? If other people in our niche part of the healthcare world are not yet doing this, that means their marketing is going to be more successful than ours over the next year to 2 years. And we are private equity backed. So that means our performance will be worse, right? And then it's like a spiraling conversation of like, how long could we keep doing this until we're fined? And I just think that is a different way to approach the problem, because Hedy and Hopp, in our hearts, we just want to protect patients' data. Right. So like, yeah, it's difficult, but like, is that extra 2% growth that you're going to experience going to be worth the potential liability down the road? I don't know that your private equity firm would think that's true.
It does come down to some POVs. Ours is out there and it's always on the side of the patient privacy, but that is definitely something for every organization's market leadership, org leadership, and legal and compliance leadership to have equal seats at the table to discuss.
I love it. Well, for our loyal listeners, I want to make sure that you follow us on all of the social channels, because we have a really fun micro content series we're going to be launching in the coming weeks called Hyd of Happy. It's going to be hosted by Julia, and she's going to be covering a lot of information that we get asked really often by prospects and clients, and really digestible short series. So we're going to put links to our socials in the show notes. Please go and follow us there if you haven't already, because I guarantee it's going to be worth your time. So thank you again for tuning in today to We Are Marketing Happy, and we'll see you on a future episode.